Good evening. This meeting of the Jefferson County Board will now come to order. Roll call, please.
We have 27 present and 3 absent.
Thank you. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Waymeyer, would you please lead us? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You're invited to remain standing for a moment to contemplate our service to the public. Thank you. Are we in compliance with open meeting law?
We are in compliance, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next is approval of the agenda. Would anybody like the order of the agenda altered in any way? Okay, we'll proceed as printed. Then we go to approval of the January 14th, 2020 meeting minutes. Supervisor Renard, please.
I move approval of the minutes as printed.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes of January 14th, 2020. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The minutes are approved. Communications.
First one is zoning committee notice of public hearing from February 20th at 7 p.m. And then on this green piece of paper will be your treasurer's report.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment this evening? We have no registrants, thank you. Next is annual reports, and our first report this evening is from Lynn Forseth, Executive Director of the Jefferson County Literacy Council. Literacy Council. It's important to pronounce words correctly. Literacy.
Thank you for the opportunity to present the work of the Literacy Council this evening. As indicated, my name is Lynn Forseth. I'm the Executive Director for the agency, and in your packet you received 2 handouts regarding our performance for the past year and also some of the goals that we've established for 2020. So there's a 20 and 21, so there's a handout inside the annual report. For those of you who are a little bit unaware of the Literacy Council, we provide adult basic education, English as a second language, GED preparation, preparation for U.S. citizenship, and computer literacy to adults throughout Jefferson County and inside the Jefferson County Jail. Instruction is provided through a small number of paid instructors and staff, but primarily we work through volunteers. And we train those volunteers to serve as tutors, sometimes in small classes and sometimes one-on-one with individuals. Last year, 8,700 hours of instruction were delivered to over 201 total learners. And inside the performance outcomes report, you'll see some of the activities that they engaged in. But some of the highlights were we had 43 adults increase their literacy levels by at least 1 NRS level, and that's the equivalent actually of 2 reading grade levels within 1 year period of time. 44 people started preparing for GED testing. 6 people actually earned their high school diplomas and 11 people transitioned to higher education. We also provide direct services to adults, but support early and family literacy efforts through special events and programs. So last year, JCLC received a Pillar Grant from the United Way of Jefferson and North Walworth counties, and we hosted a family literacy event in October. The event was actually a tea party to celebrate reading and good manners. And we had 30 guests attend that. The children participated in games and activities. We served lunch, and they had an opportunity to spend time in a reading corner. And this was all occurring at the Soulful Toad in Fort Atkinson. I did bring a little show and tell, but I'm going to be a little challenged with not enough hands tonight. But so one of the things we did is we invited the children to bring a friend to the event. So they all came with either a doll or a stuffed animal. And so they were modeling the behaviors and the caring that their parents were giving for them with the friend that they brought to the event as well. So they all had an opportunity to make a little sleeping bag for their friend at the event. And we have just adorable pictures of them, you know, of course, walking around with their friend in the sleeping bag. And when they left, they all received a storybook, a children's storybook. But the parents received this book, which is a kid's guide to manners. And it was about social etiquette and just written in a fun way for children. So we used the event both to reinforce the importance of reading, but also a little character education to help people develop, you know, those behaviors and mannerisms from little on. We will repeat the event this fall with the support of grant funding excuse me, from the Valero Benefit for Children Foundation, which is the first time we received that grant this year. I also had the opportunity to attend the Wisconsin Health Literacy Conference last year. And so in response to health equity concerns, JCLC purchased and distributed 250 manuals. We purchased dental care manuals and health care manuals, both in English and in Spanish, and we distributed those to local clinics throughout the Jefferson County area. So we actually took these books along with bilingual children's books for their waiting room to the Community Dental Clinic, the Rock River Free Clinic, Watertown Cares Clinic, the Watertown Family Center, and the Jefferson and Watertown Public Health Departments. So again, this was something to try to just address basic information for families and that they could use this as a developmental guide throughout the lifespan of their children. So the dental clinic in particular has indicated that they were very helpful for their families. The other piece that we deliver is jail education. So we've been doing that for about 10 years inside the Jefferson County Jail. And right now, our agency is the only community-based organization that has received federal funding for the last 2 years. And because of this, some of the changes that we've made in the jail, in particular with our GED testing program, we were asked to report out at 3 different state called meetings this year, representing our program as a model for others to follow. So we recently purchased 11 secured laptops for use in the jail. One of our challenges there is the fact that we cannot have individuals on the internet, but the teachers still like to access electronic resources and people like learning electronically. So these laptops are clear. You can see there's no way they can hide anything inside the laptops, but they also do not have any opportunity to insert any flash drives or CD-ROMs, so they're unable to access the internet. But on the laptops, we have stored information that is being broadcast from a small server. And this is all it is. It's just the size of a hand. But this contains open source content material that our instructors can use that mimic the look of people being on the internet without actually being on the internet. So they're able to access programs like Khan Academy, college textbooks, preparation for ACT and CLEP tests. They're able to do some vocational programming on here, and there's also information regarding employability skills and soft skills for employment. So it's been very helpful. We just have that introduced recently into the classroom. This technology was originally developed for countries that do not have internet access. So the information was originally being used in third world countries where they wanted electronic resources without internet access. So now it's been adapted for use in the jail settings. We also, in the jail, are doing, as I indicated, in-house GED testing. So last year we did very well with that. We are continuing to get people started with their GEDs. Sometimes they're not able to finish, but we do know that as they move on back into the community or into other state facilities, they are finishing their GED as well. So our plans for the next year, right now we have a goal of increasing access to more women and children in the next year. Statistically, women ages 25 to 44 and their children are the populations most likely to be living in poverty. JCLC seeks to provide access both in the community, but especially to those that are incarcerated in the Jefferson County Jail. So new initiatives will be developed in the next year, drawing upon these new electronic resources and even looking at opportunities maybe to increase programming on the weekends. The laptops will also be instrumental, increasing opportunities for post-secondary training. So right now I'm working with Madison College and the Workforce Development Board of South Central Wisconsin to try to design a transition program into the metal fabrication program at the Fort Atkinson campus. And so this week, Thursday, we will have our first meeting to begin writing a grant to fund that particular activity and to have more discussion about how we might be able to serve individuals, in particular those that are on Huber release and may be able to go to the campus for training. So the ongoing success of the Jefferson County Literacy Council is really largely due to our collaboration with the county and with the Sheriff's Department, and we can't thank you enough for that support. We do operate as a 501c3 nonprofit. We are primarily funded through fundraising, grants, and the support of the county and the Sheriff's Department. So it's February, so we must be doing our major fundraiser for the year. So on the table, you'll see flyers for our next event. It's Friday, February 28th, and it's a Roaring 20s event. So if you have the opportunity to come out, please do so. We'll be at the Jefferson Area Business Center. That's how we fund our operations. Do you have any questions that I could answer?
Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, may I offer a personal testimonial to the great work of the Literacy Council. Many of you know that my significant other is an English language learner. She's been taking classes since September, 4 days a week at the Literacy Council. One day, not too long ago, one morning, as guys sometimes do, I muttered something about something that was mildly irritating to me. And she came shooting out of the adjoining room and said, "I understood what you said." I didn't much appreciate it. Thank you for your work. Oh, might as well. Okay, our next annual report is from Chrissy Wen, Area Director of UW Extension.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you for having me here tonight, and thank you for letting me come to talk about the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension here in Jefferson County. In your handout, we have, you'll have a 2-page snapshot of our programming. This only gives a little bit of a piece, but I figured that a little snapshot is good for this sort of audience. I'm going to highlight a couple of things that we've been doing in the Jefferson County office over the past year. And then I have a guest with me who'd like to share some of his perspectives on 4-H. So the county pays or funds for 2.3 FTEs through the Division of Extension. So we are University of Wisconsin employees, but we're here to serve Jefferson County. So within that 2.3 FTE investment from the county, we're able to provide also additional staff and resources of the university. So this comes to no cost at the county. So in total, the county's investment of the 2.3 is actually about 5 staff that we have working within the county on a lot of different topic areas and program areas to serve the needs of the residents. This includes a natural resource educator, food-wise staff, and of course all of our UW specialists that come into the county to do different educational programming. So with that, a combination of educators and specialists, and beyond the numbers that are on your report, we've served over 836 people in addition to those through these other avenues of educational components that we have. This includes a biotech exploration stations that you might have saw at Wisconsin Farm Technology Days that was hosted here, and a poultry management talk that was hosted in Palmyra by our specialist, Ron Keene. So beyond that, UW-Madison Division of Extension, formerly known as UW Extension, of what you may have heard, we changed our names recently. But it's really the Wisconsin idea in action throughout Jefferson County, and we're really happy to be able to do this every day, day in and day out, is to serve everyone within youth to adults within the county. So Steve Shemileski is our community development educator. He is part-time in Waukesha and part-time in Jefferson. Jefferson funds him at a 0.3 FTE. He does a lot of different nonprofit work. He's really integral in understanding the nonprofits. He's had interviews and assessments with 28 of the nonprofits within the county, and has created a 5-part series that's an online training for those nonprofits to engage in some of their work that they're doing. Laverne Jorgson is our agriculture educator. He serves our farm community through direct education, such as youth tractor safety, and above and beyond that, you can imagine the amount of phone calls that Laverne takes and the in-person one-on-one trainings with our farm community, just to have the research base right there on the farm with them, and providing that best practice in the real time. FoodWise is a program that is federally funded through SNAP dollars and through our FNEP program. So we have Lisa Carollo and a brand new educator. Her name is Madeline Buchholz. She's from the county. She lives in Fort Atkinson, and they are cross county also. So they're part in Walworth County and part in Jefferson County. But they are serving our low income population to better have access to some food choices, so to make the healthy choice the best choice for those populations. They're working with programs like WIC, and they're getting engaged in some of our nonprofits, some of the food pantries here in Jefferson County, and eventually they'll be in the schools. Lisa is a bilingual educator, so that's adding some benefit to our population of our Latinx population that speaks Spanish. And 4-H is another large program that we have here in the county. Some of you maybe have participated in 4-H or have youth or some engagement. But the 4-H stands for Head, Heart, Hands, and Health, in case you're not familiar. But 4-H is it's a welcoming environment for young people of all beliefs and backgrounds, trying to empower them to create some positive change within their communities. We have a lot of hands-on projects, health, science, agriculture, civic engagement, anywhere where we can have a positive environment, and they receive guidance from our adult volunteers within that program. On your handout, it talks about we have 28 community clubs, 260 volunteers, and 611 youth participants in that program. There are approximately 200 project meetings annually within the 4-H 4-H realm of the world. So there's speech and poster contests, there's club officer training, project learning day, Clover Bud for our younger youth, 4-H summer camp, and 4-H open house, new family meetings, and so much more, even just to get a volunteer engaged within the program, and of course, the fair. But this program really wouldn't be possible without the dedicated volunteers. So in total, between the Master Gardener volunteers, the 4-H volunteers, we have about 270 volunteers that are UW-Madison volunteers that are dedicated. They dedicated over 16,000 hours in 2019. That's a value of just about $400,000 that they're giving back to the county in their time. They work directly with our staff to create these programs and come up with ideas and develop these youth-adult partnerships that are so valuable in our communities. So without me going into all of the things that are great about 4-H, and I'm sure that a lot of us could talk about that, I've invited Thomas Van Zanten here, and he's going to share just briefly a little bit about his experience within 4-H.
Hello everyone. Like Christy said, my name is Thomas Van Zanten. I go to Watertown High School, but I live here in Jefferson. I'm a member of the 4-H Jefferson Boosters. We meet on Sunday, the first Sunday of every month, down at the Methodist Church here in town. Chrissy did a great job of touching on what 4-H, like all the great things that 4-H does for not only the community, but also just the people living within it. But I'd like to talk about some of the experiences that I've had within it and what makes 4-H so great for me. I was an active participant in Special Emphasis for a number of years. For those of you who don't know what that is, Special Emphasis was just basically every year, I don't know, the 4-H people would put out like a topic or a question, and you would write a speech about it, and then at the fair you would present that speech and you would get graded on that, and it was like a project you would do at the fair. That helped me to become better at speaking and more confident speaking in front of large crowds of people. I've also very much enjoyed going to 4-H camp up at UW Upland Woods. I was a camper for a number of years, and then more recently I've had the opportunity to be a counselor. I've been a counselor, I believe, for about 4 years now. I've gone 3 to 4 times to camp 3 to 4 times each summer, so that's like 12 times in total I've been a counselor, so I would say I'm kind of experienced. I definitely feel that it's made me a better leader, and it also has helped me with managing people better, whether it's from the kiddos to the adults' expectations of me and my fellow co-counselors. And it has also made me more able to do things on the fly, things wouldn't always go to schedule. My mom, for example, my mother texted me today. She's like, hey, there's a county board meeting tonight. I'd really like you to go because I want you to talk about 4-H. So I was like, all right, let's do it. And here we are. I also had the great opportunity to show goats at the fair and take care of them, obviously, and that helped me with discipline, not only with getting up early in the morning before school to take care of them, but then also making sure I was home on time to feed them and milk them and take care of the kids when it was that time of year. And it also helped me with like understanding animals and the showmanship behind that, and it helped me get deeper into fair on a level that I never would have gotten if I had just been, like the average person who goes to fair. I also had the great opportunity to go to on the Washington, D.C. trip. It was the Youth Leadership Conference, and that definitely helped me better understand government and how that runs, and it also gave me the opportunity to connect with a whole bunch of new people and make a lot of new friends. And 4-H overall has done that for me as well. So, any questions?
Are there any questions? Thank you, Mr. Van Vaesen, for coming out and addressing the board this evening. Quite impressive. I hope that you'll consider elective office once you're over 18 years old, because I think you have a lot of potential. Thank you. Our next annual report is on county board meeting fees. You have that at your desk. I do not have a copy in front of me, but I did look at it before the meeting. Thank you. the downward trend over the past several years continues. And again, that's to the credit of many of the committee chairs who cancel meetings when there is no decision-making items to be had on the agenda. Makes us more productive and saves us a couple bucks, so thank you for that. Any questions about county board meeting fees here in 2019? Okay. We'll move on to special order of business. Mr. Waymire will come up front and lead.
All right. So obviously we're in the midst of a large project right now, and last month we provided the documents, and this has been circling among the staff as really the update on personnel ordinance. So we want to take some time tonight based on some feedback to kind of give some updates of where things are at. Partly some questions that came back from board members and employees, and some of it's a history lesson of where we got where we're at, and some guiding principles and visions as we look ahead. And then we want to kind of summarize some of the commentaries and feedback we've received so far and some that you may have received, and then kind of talk through some of the future topics that we need to look at. Tonight, and it's going to continue to be, is continue the education and engagement process. As you can see, this is not for decisions tonight because there's still some more work that needs to take place. Our intent is to make sure we get this as close to right as we can. And if we need to take more time, that's the intent, to take more time. And so with that being said, I'm going to let Terry begin with the initial part, and then we'll go from there.
So as Ben mentioned, the beginning of this is we really just want to go through maybe some information you already have had, but just as a refresher or reminder, we want to cover some of kind of the background, the reference information is what was handed out last month to the board, which included that 178-page draft of most of the policies. We still got a section to go, a memo that just explains some of the history, and then a summary sheet that highlighted what at least I felt and the work groups felt were some of the major items of changes or amendments, additions to the policies. And then the second part was just going into the background or purpose. Why did we even start looking at this? And one was for the applicability of it. We also knew that there were conflicting policies within the policy itself or with other practices that we had within the county. And then also just to look to make sure that it was sensible and functional. And when we get to the applicability, I don't know how many of you maybe know this, and I didn't jump into this, but the last time we did some major revisions was after Act 10, so about 10 years ago. Prior to that, the last time there was a whole overhaul of the ordinance was in December of 2004, and before that, January of 1986. Things have changed since 1986, but there are some things in the policies that hadn't, and that's one reason. I think one thing that happened was we started getting some inconsistencies because we had changed things in one part and not in another, and just a time that we needed to take a look at it, and we'll get into one of the goals of going forward on this. Again, I'm not going to have to run through this. You have this in there. This is just some of the conflicting policies and practices, for examples, that we came across. Some of the other reasons that we're looking at this was to make, again, is it functional for today? For our employees, we wanted to make sure that everybody in the county could understand what it was. So get rid of some of the legalese kind of talk that was in it before, which is sometimes hard to do when we have to deal with employment law issues. These are laws and regulations that have specific languages that we have to have in there. And that's going to be on our department, on a management, for our management supervisors to make sure employees understand what some of that is and what their rights and responsibilities are in those sections, which is a big kind of, and when we get to the end, that's kind of the last phase of all of this, is all the training that's going to have to be done. Just talking a little bit about the purpose of it, any personnel policy, any manual that we have, we want to make sure that we're able to use it to communicate to employees, that they can use it as a resource for not only new employees, but current employees. And then that second point up there that limits the legal liability. Again, we're talking about our employees, and they are very important, they are our resources, but we still as a county have some legal obligations that we have to be aware of that we wanted to address in these policies. Going on to the procedure, I'm not going to read through this. This is a lot of information that you already have. It just talks about all the work that we've done already. We started this just about a year ago this month with some discussions that we were having, hired some consultants, worked through the summer with them, started some work groups at the end of 2019, got to where we are today with the distribution to the county board last month, and I should say where we are today, just having some more discussions. We did put out at the same time that we distributed this to the board, not a questionnaire, a survey, so to speak, to all employees where they could provide comments back to us. And I'm sure many of you have heard comments as well. So hopefully when we get to that section, we're going to review what we think are the major components of those concerns that employees have, and hopefully that answers most of the questions you have all received as well. But if not, please, we want to hear what those are so we can address those. Do you want to talk a little bit more?
So yeah, last week, part of the feedback we got from some board members and groups is we were starting to meet with groups of employees who had brought forward issues. So one group, as an example, last week we met with management and line employees of the highway department as an example. And so that is things that we're trying to do to make sure we're hearing constructive feedback, hearing concerns or opportunities to work together, and bring that back forward to the document as it's finalized. So those are things that, as beyond that what was listed in the procedure, those are some other things we're trying to do to make sure we're having a document that really makes sense when we're done with this process. So we kind of use this as a guiding principles as we look at these documents, and some of these come from the strategic plan as you start looking into it. But really, we're focused on 5 main areas as we go through this. So the first is consideration of all players, and this has been something we've talked about with employee groups, with department heads specifically. The 3 main players as we look at this. One is the employees themselves. Obviously, this impacts what occurs with their employment on a day-to-day basis. The second is the county. We're a large employer. We're typically a top 10 size employer in the county. So we have obligations as an employer both to our employees, but also to us as employers running the operation. And the third is the citizens, stakeholders, public. How does that all mesh? In some cases, there may be a perceived conflict, but I think in many cases we can make those conflicts appear the right solution to balance all 3 needs of these groups of players. So we highlighted the guiding principles from the strategic plan, and if you look at it specifically, numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8, there's a lot of things that correlate to what we're trying to achieve in this document. A lot relates to the financial assets of the county, and those are a lot of resources, time, talents. We're looking at how we make decisions, so this is part of the transparency process, talking to board, talking to employees, getting feedback. Terry mentioned we had working groups to get feedback from employees from different levels of employment to functionality. As we try to work through this document, realize we have about 227 different classifications of employees in the county. So trying to create a document that covers all the different aspects of that, in some cases legal aspects, can be a challenge, but it's also a good opportunity to have those conversations. 5, this was a quick one, was just the human resources as a whole, and this is one to emphasize a little bit. We're a professional service business, if you really get down to what all our staff does. And so our largest expenditure is people, and so that's why these documents are very important. Talking about transparency, we want to make sure staff, our elected officials, and the public understands what we're trying to do, and make sure we do have that positive interchange of communication and feedback. And we've got some great constructive feedback since we've released the document.
I just want to add on that was a comment when we had with the highway meeting. They did acknowledge that we do more as an employer listening to our employees from the experiences that they've had with previous employers, so that says a lot about our county.
Terry hit this a little bit, and consistency and fairness, and part of this is developing uniform rules, but also understanding how it applies to different functionalities. A lot of this also, as we get to the flexibility comment coming forward, is how do we also assist department heads in making department rules that allow them the flexibility to work with their staff. As I said, we have some operations that are traditional 8 to 4:30, and we got operations that are 24/7, 365 days a year, and in some cases not knowing when those days are going to be called in. And how do we handle that? But the other part of the flexibility we're looking at too is how do we look at the future structure for the future workforce? As Terry mentioned, a lot of these rules are over 30 years old, and what were they designed for? And so we've done some updates that create some flexibility as we look at recruitment and retention, but part of the goal of this is also create more flexibility as we look at what are the issues coming forward in the future years. An example is that, what about telecommuting? How does it impact and what is going to be our rules and regulations to telecommuting in the future? There are some counties that are reducing their physical footprint because of their jobs are on the road in clinic settings. As an example, they're on the road seeing clients. They've reduced their physical footprint because of the telecommuting policy. So those are things that we need to look at for the future.
So far, we've communicated pretty well, going back and forth on who's going to do what on here, but this next section gets into really the comments or the feedback that we got from employees. I'm not going to run through this sheet. It just kind of summarizes, and you have it before you because this is probably hard to read, the different sections and the number of comments that we got on each section. And what we printed out for you is kind of blank slate. If you guys want to make comments or notes, I should say, about some of the discussions that we're going to have, because we're going to try to answer some of these questions. We're not going to go through each section because some of them we just don't think it's really controversy. For example, in the introduction, the comments I had was, there's one person, we really need to send this through an editor to proof, so I'm looking at Jim and maybe a couple others in here. We know that, it's a draft, it's not perfect yet. And then just identifying some of those inconsistencies maybe that people have found. And so with this, we're just going to kind of flip through this, and if one of us thinks that we're at a section where it's worth discussing, we're just going to kind of talk about it and what our plans are going forward.
I think the one quick thing in introduction that we're adding is just really is the purpose statement. Each of these sections you'll see a true purpose statement of why these are being put in place, and that's something that we did not have before, trying to explain the meaning behind it. All right, so there's a couple items that we are exploring and having conversation about conditions of ongoing employment eligibility. Some of it relates to who and when needs criminal background checks. So we have some staff that's a requirement, or caregiver background checks just based on the functionality of what they do. Some of it we have sections that must be fingerprinted because they access to certain records they must have, and how does that impact on employment. And part of it is also looking at credit checks as a whole. And that is an area that we're continuing to need to refine, identify the positions that potentially might need to have a credit check, and what does it mean for ongoing requirements. When I was hired, I was a position, as an example, there was some additional requirements beyond just a normal interview. There was a background, there was an investigation, there's a credit check. When we hired Mark as a CFO, same thing. We did some checks. Now, when we say a credit check, this is not you get a number score, those kind of things. It's called a soft check, because part of it is you don't want to impact the employees if we do go down that path. So we have some homework that we're doing on that one. This is one of those risk mitigation items that we're looking at, but part of it is the expanded scope of what is needed there.
I think just to go off of that, one of the main questions I think we got on credit checks is that going to impact my credit score? And so we would use an outside company that does this, and they do a really nice job describing this. They do what's called a soft check, and that does not impact an employee's credit score. I think we had at least 7 or 8 people that at least commented on paper, and I think more verbally, that they were concerned about that. So if you've gotten that question, please assure them that these are considered soft checks, and that will not affect their credit. The other thing that is in this section is doing self-reporting of traffic violations. I know some employees were concerned about who does that apply to. If I think it was pretty much in agreement that if they regularly drive for the county, that makes sense. But should, you as supervisors who drive for the county maybe to go to an off-site meeting once a year, should that count? So those are things that we're looking into a little bit more. We did look at our comparable counties too, also asking them who does these things. I haven't gotten a great response back yet. I would say for the majority, the criminal background checks is not uncommon at all to do. The credit checks is rather new, but as Ben mentioned, we have a big risk liability with that. I think if you do any kind of Googling on public sector, or not even public sector, any sector in regards to fraud that happens and things that were not done, what could we have done to maybe lessen that risk? That I think it's just prudent for the county to be able to do that.
Recruitment selection, I think the one thing here that we're looking at is a referral incentive for employees. If they find a good person who might make sense to come here and talk about how great it is. An example of what's going on right now is in the Sheriff's Department, they have a recruitment retention group, and they're actually actively getting out to some of the technical colleges and finding folks who might be likely candidates for our staff. And so the pipeline is tough right now across all sectors, and so this is something we're looking at because that makes sense to bring forward to help us out. This kind of ties in a little bit as we look at the hours of work, scheduling closures. Obviously, like last year's example, we shut down for a polar vortex, and this board took action to provide emergency authorization that folks could use sick time because the policy did write if we closed, employees who did not have to work had to use paid benefited time they want to be paid. The highway guys were in here, sheriff guys were in here, we had folks at Human Services had to come in as well, but one of the benefits that was offered was sick time. So that's part of the conversation, what occurs if there is a closure because of weather-related events. We are also looking at paid time off, flexibility for 2 weeks, especially related to exempt employees, how does that look? And then part of the vacation schedule, and that's one of those policies that Terry mentioned that still needs to be finalized to be released.
And I think just so the board is aware right now what is in the recommendation of the proposal for that call, or if we shut down or close because of inclement weather or some other emergency, is what our current policy is, which is typically you can take it unpaid, you can flex your time and make up the hours, or use vacation, comp, or holiday. The policy is not currently written to use sick, so there was some feedback saying write that into the policy, or even if you're going to close, you should pay us for the day. So we'll go back and take a look at that and best practices on those issues.
And that one was mixed, and when a lot of counties are talking about it, about half the counties pay, half don't. So there's not a good, quote-unquote, comparable county in terms of if you look at the data right now. It's split. The non-exempt, this is one that we're, hours of work, that's the one we've specifically been talking with certain departments of and the impacts to their operations and trying to recognize some of the hours that they have to work. This includes some potential expansion of paid on-call hours for individuals, folks who have to basically be prepared on a moment's notice. So those are items that we're looking at as part of this section as well.
And that was the biggest discussion I think that we had with the highway department in regards to this, is the overtime that they get when called out in the middle of the night, and I guess I want to reiterate that because I had a lot of comments that said if I'm called out on the weekend or in the middle of the night, that's not going to be paid at time and a half, that's all straight time. That's not how this policy is written. Policy also has another section that says if you're called in for emergency type situations, you will be paid at time and a half. So it does say unless it's adjacent to the beginning or the end of the shift. So we listened to them and they had some really great points that we're going to go back and take a look at that. But if you're here from the highway that they're saying if they get called in on a holiday, they're not going to be paid time and a half, that's not true. That's not how this is written.
The other part of this is the hours worked for exempt employees. We actually currently have 2 tiers of exempt employees. We have department heads and attorneys and court commissioners. That's one level of exempt. That's more of the traditional exempt. And then we have the other exempt employees who earn a level of compensation time. So we are looking at best practices and some legal issues related to FLSA standards, but at the same token, how does it impact vacation time for those employees? And how does it look at flexibility for those employees that's in line with the exempt practices and policies in various sectors?
So again, because I'm thinking if you guys are getting these questions so you can respond, our current policy for a certain level of exempt is for every hour they work, they get an hour of comp time that's banked and they can take off at a later time. If they can't use it, it's forfeited at the end of the year. For the most of our employees, it's not a big amount. Some employees get a significant amount. What we're proposing is to go more of a salary type structure but have flexibility within a 2-week or 80-hour pay period. But it's not saying that if I can't flex within that time, that maybe, if I'm looking at accounting, for example, that there's certain times of years we know things are more busy that they simply cannot take off, but that they're able to flex their time later on. That's what I'm finding, talking to most other counties, especially our comparable counties. They have more what's called flex time, and that's what we're proposing. But one thing I don't think that we haven't brought out, as Ben mentioned, is our benefits schedule yet, or our vacation schedule. So we are looking at making changes of that as well. So.
Voluntary secondary employment, a couple items we had to clarify in here to put specifically volunteers is oftentimes we have folks volunteers. It's something in line with the county. Especially when you start talking non-exempt employees, there's this little thing called FLSA standards we need to follow. And so if it's closely aligned to their duties and they're a non-exempt employee, in theory, we should be paying them overtime for that work. And so one thing we have to clarify is how that volunteering status may work and impact them. Not to take away from a lot of good work folks want to do, we just have to have that conversation with the folks, and that's one thing that we did have to add to this.
I think we had questions of why can't we? So I think it's, again, a lot of these I think are education and training issues that we need to follow up with.
So this is one of the new sections. This was actually recommended from employees. Right now our travel is governed actually by a reimbursement ordinance, but it really doesn't specify everything related to travel. And so this section was really to help clarify and give guidance for travel. Part of this again is trying to factor in a policy that covers every scenario. So my joke or analogy has always been is my military experience. There's a regulation for almost anything you do in the military. I could probably find something you did wrong by sneezing because of a regulation, all right? So my point of that is we don't want to have this so detailed out that there's not guidance and some flexibility that department heads and management can make common sense decisions. So an example is oftentimes when folks are traveling to a conference, we have a state room rate. And a lot of times that rate is not honored, even within the state. In many cases, in other locations, it's even higher. So how do we go through an approval process to make sure A, it's within the budget and it's reasonable and it's in line? So we just want to provide some guidance, and that's an area we know we need to have a little more clarification on, but we also make sure the managers have some flexibility to make, quite honestly, some common sense decisions when it gets down to travel expenses.
And I would agree with that. Most of the comments I heard on travel was people were happy we had a policy on it. We would receive questions very frequently on how to handle pay during travel reimbursement because we didn't have a policy on it, and we found different departments were doing it differently. And that just doesn't go well either when you see somebody over there getting something you didn't get, and it's kind of one rule. But we did make it more of an umbrella type thing where, again, for these reimbursement of rooms, if you can't get a state room rate, what's acceptable, to leave that up to the department head or manager to make those decisions. You'll find that some of these sections, I shouldn't say they're duplicate, but they're addressed in different areas, so that's why we're going through this, because a lot of this we've already discussed. I'm going to, on the additional pay for non-exempt employees, one of the other things that we know is an issue is in this policy that's being proposed, we don't indicate what core hours are in any department. Our current policy indicates like the courthouse is open 8 to 4:30. We know it's got to be open 8 to 4:30, but we're leaving it up to the department saying not every employee needs to be here 8 to 4:30. You just need to make sure you have the, your department covered. Same thing with with highway. We are hearing that people want to have those core hours. We're not sure, it's one of the discussions we have to go back and looking for kind of that guaranteed 40 hours. And that, I'm just gonna say it out loud, that's just something that I cannot recommend, not knowing what the future brings for anything. When again, you may have heard some comments or feedback on that. If there's work to be done, you need to be here. But if there's not work to be done, you shouldn't be here. Oops. Again, this is a section, we had a lot of questions about, you didn't mention anything about what sick time can be used for, that we haven't gotten there. That's one of the biggest sections that we have. We need to review it as a management team and pull our work group together and then go through the same process that we've done for all of this. We didn't really have much comment or feedback on this, but in our work group we sure did. We had it much more restrictive initially, and with the feedback from the work group, this is one policy that got changed significantly and brought back to make it more general, which I think is a good thing because the work group was right. We did not get any feedback from employees that this was an issue.
Quick weapons in the workplace, and this is something we got to work through a little bit with the sheriff's department too. There's more requirements for staff to potentially have things such as pepper spray on them and make sure they're properly trained. So that's something that we are has been talked about in the past and probably needs to be considered to talk about what's safe and what buildings. Unfortunately, we do have episodes with employees in the public. We've had cases to the point we've had to get TROs for our staff because relationships with some issues with the public. We just had an issue last night. And so for some, they think it's public personal safety, so that's something that has been brought up in the past that we need to look at. All right, one of the bigger changes, and this was brought up in the memo, is currently, with the exception of department heads and various other classifications of employees, whether it's civil service, folks covered on contract, chief deputies, things like that, department heads, there are what's called just cause status right now after probation period. Those other employees have different designations. Example is department heads have called the pleasure of, some are more traditional at will. So this document is looking at a process to change all the employees at will. With that being said, we continue to maintain the grievance process required by state statute. There's also provisions in there of how things will proceed through. So the grievance process, there's one person under the ordinance right now who can release them of their position with the exception of a couple constitutional positions, and that's my role. But after that, there is the opportunity for discipline and termination that can be appealed to an independent hearing officer and eventually to the entire county board. And those items are still built into the grievance process in this document with the at-will. We've also provided a list of documents within there of what are some of those offenses. There are still basic principles in terms of how managers should manage, and those are all spelled out in the personnel ordinance.
And I think that kind of comes to the end of the major comments that we receive from employees. So if there's questions from the board or feedback that you've received, that if it's something that we can answer now or will be available after the meeting, or you can always email or call me also.
Keep in mind that you can go in and see Terry and or Ben at any time. Are there any questions this evening? Supervisor Schultz, please.
Yes, you were referring about employment at will. Does that change the county from a four-clause employer to an at-will employer?
Currently, again, it depends on your position specifically. The majority of the employees are just cause now, and that would change it to an at-will.
You would change it to at-will?
Correct.
And we actually had a number of employees, as many employees who were maybe not for it. We did have several comments from employees that said that they were very supportive of that.
Any other questions for this evening? Supervisor Morris, please.
perhaps it's not germane, but I didn't hear anything about or see anything about the role of employee unions. Does that play a role in this?
In various sections, there's things carved out where this is applicable to unions, and we have one bargaining unit that is still with us, and that's the sheriff's union right now. And so there, examples, the grievance process, it'll talk through that. That section does not apply to those who are covered by a collective bargaining agreement.
And we do address within the ordinance, there's no comments really made of it, but the civil service process is referred to in the ordinance, in this as well.
And so civil service applies to when we hire deputies, but it also handles their promotion status, but it also have, and she went out that way, but actually technically under state statute, our veteran service position, even though it's a department head position, follows the civil service process as well.
Other questions for this evening? So it's fair to say that this process will go into the next term.
Yeah, it's going to go into the next term, yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Would you like to go to the next
Yes, sir.
section of special order?
So the next several items will be quicker, I promise, okay? So at your desk, you should see something that is called Proposed County Board Rules. And so tonight, I've been asked to provide a summary by the Executive Committee quickly of what the recommended changes are. These have been voted on by the Executive Committee. They still have another committee meeting before the March board meeting. As a reminder, how the board rules usually take place is the current board will approve the amended proposed board rules, and then at the organizational meeting in April, when the new board is set, one of your requirements is to adopt new board rules that will govern how you operate. So there's two opportunities to look at the board rules. So because of some of the items, I've been asked to provide a quick overview. Many of you are aware of some of these proposed changes because some committees have discussed these already. But to make sure that you have an opportunity to provide feedback to the Executive Committee at their next meeting. So the first two proposed changes are related to committees. So the very first one is a recommendation to combine the Finance and Human Resource Committee. This committee would assume all the duties and responsibilities currently outlined by those committees separately within the board rules. The biggest change would be that it would be a 7-member committee, and that, as you may recall in past history, one of the officers of the board would have to serve on that committee. The recommendation is that would be at the total discretion of the chair. And so the main duties and responsibilities do not change. We just have, in essence, combined it. For those who may be familiar, this would also be our Civil Service Commission, our committee that would oversee any discipline actions that come in front of them in that body as required by statute. They would take care of insurance issues, they take care of budget, all the normal things. So the front page, you will see what that combined committee looks like. The page right after that is how those committees are currently separated out. So if there's any questions on that. The second major proposal is to combine the Land and Water Conservation Committee and University Extension Education Committee. I believe both of those subcommittees have, those committees have already reviewed it and provided an opinion back to the Executive Committee. One of the reasons this was brought forward as a potential thing to review is there's a statutory requirement that 2 members of the Land and Water Committee must also serve in the UW Extension Committee. That is a statutory requirement that we must follow. We had a conversation yesterday, is it still a relevant statute? We should have, but it's something that we still must follow. This committee is already 7 members, and there's no proposed change to the size of that committee. This is one committee. Statute has some shalls or mays related to how that committee is structured. So there's a shall that the Farm Service Agency chair, and you'll be acting on this tonight, so serve on the committee or a designee. So that's one non-board member who's on there. You must have no more, you have to have at least 5 county board members on this committee as well. And then for historical purposes, the Land and Water Committee was combined with the Farmland Preservation Committee. And so one of those members was put on that committee as well in the past. So that's where that 7th member also came in from past experience. So this spells out the duties and responsibility and references the statutes where some of those committee assignments come from and requirements. So the top part is what it would look like if it was a combined committee. And the language before is those committees as separate bodies, as the current language. And then the last item that impacts committees directly is the request and recommendation that the broadband working group continues into a new term. If you may recall, when the broadband working group was put together, there's a sunset clause would end this year. But with the unknown where the grant is going, that we hope to hear by March, their executive committee factored either A, we're gonna have a big project to help oversee and implement, or B, we have plan B to figure out how we get broadband into the county. And so the recommendation is to extend it, but also extend it for just a defined one more term as well. As a side note, for those other two combined committees, the discussion has been that those are trial basis combinations. We don't have language built into that yet, but it was the intent that would be a trial basis combination of those committees. I guess any questions on that before I get into maybe a little longer portion here?
Any questions about the sections regarding combination of committees? It looks like you can move on, sir.
All right, so the last main item and is discussion of remote attendance. So this was brought up 2 years ago as a potential idea to look at, especially when looking at the demographics, we'll say, of a changing world. And how do we encourage folks to participate in the county board, especially with many of our meetings during the day or conflicting with business meetings or other obligations. And so we built some remote attendance rules that kind of, I'll say this is kind of a phased approach. There's some restrictions related to this proposal. And we built these rules from other experiences I have had to make sure it's taken care of. So up top, this would take care of all standing committees. So that's everything that's appointed by the county board chair. And then in limited fashion, other boards and commissions. So examples, that would be the Board of Health, Human Services Board, CJCC. There's several other boards that we belong to, but we're an appointee to those boards. We don't control those boards. So example is the Bridges Treasury Library System. We can't tell them the rules they're gonna follow. So each of those entities have to make their own rules. So that's why we have spelled out those specific ones that we have more control of because they report to the county board in essence. We have identified that remote attendance for county board meetings, however, would not be allowed. I should say we, the committee. This is some proposals. Rule statement, I'm not going to go through this whole thing per se, but there's some specific things that it was thought of that should not be allowed for remote attendance. So an example is closed session items. To ensure folks know what takes place in closed session is done in closed session. Having an outside venue such as a telephone or something like that, there was a concern not knowing what could be on the other end. So in theory, what would happen is that the committee had to go in closed session. The individual who's on that call would have to be taken off that call. If the committee has the authority for final action or it's a quasi-judicial body. So an example up top, we did not include the Board of Adjustments because they make final decisions related to variances as an example. With the theory being that if you make the final decisions, you should be there as a recommendation up to the full body of the county board, and there's no another kick at the can per se to come forward. And so that's why it's geared towards those things that are not final action. Another example is Finance Committee. The board has delegated the Finance Committee to sell foreclosed houses. That's a final action. And that would be something that if you were doing remote attendance for Finance Committee, you would have to abstain from that vote. We try to define what a member is because it's county board members for most of the appointments, but we also have public members. So that's why we just could not say county board supervisors. We have a notification requirement. So technology is great when it works, but we got to make sure it works. So we are asking there's a 24-hour notice requirement and the purpose of and a reason behind it. And then there's some provisions as check and balance that you'll see in section 3 that the committee can make a final determination if they'll allow that member to participate via remote attendance. So again, that's a little check and balance by the committee if they have a comfort level there. One item that was also brought up is that the chair, if you're chair of a committee, you can participate by remote attendance, but then if you're participating by remote attendance, you cannot run that meeting. Your vice chair would have to take over any meeting. Logistically, it was spelled from the executive committee. how do you control the space, especially when you have members of the public there and you can't see who's there, unless we get video teleconferencing all around, but we're not quite there yet. The onus on that, who's requesting remote attendance, on their end, they gotta take care of the technology. It could be as simple as a cell phone. Fair Park, we do this with a member now, unofficially. Someone who's has a place to go, and we just put it on the cell phone. It works quite well in that environment. But we have some other rooms where a simple telephone will not work in that environment, so we need to make sure we have provisions in place. And I guess the last two main things to point out here, the intention is that if a member is attending by a remote attendance, they'd be paid a per diem, but we're not going to pay mileage. So Supervisor Jones, if you're going to remote attendance tonight from Florida, we're not paying for your mileage to Florida. I need a refund. And then the last thing that's been requested is that we develop an annual report back to the committee starting next May to the board, excuse me, of folks who do utilize remote attendance and how often it happens, so we can kind of track what's going on. There's a lot more details in there, so if there's any questions or clarification, I could take a lot of time to explain this.
Are there any questions about the remote attendance proposal at this time? Okay, I guess we can move on.
Right, and this is very quick just because this is moving quick and I've been asked some questions. So comp plan and the farmland preservation plan is continuing in full swing. The last 2 days we had 3 sessions on focus groups, being agricultural jurisdictions, meaning our townships and municipalities, and this afternoon natural resources. Tomorrow we're having focus groups on transportation and housing, and next week we're having one on tourism, and then we have a couple planned for young professionals and the Latino population and emerging technologies. I'm saying all that because we're looking ahead that we're going to be trying to do some regional meetings here soon again. Tentatively, we're planning this at some point in April. We're going to be looking at school spring break calendars and try to schedule things around that and Easter. And we're also looking at later this year, probably in July is when the initial draft is going to be put together. That is not a firm date, but I know we've been asked where we're at with this process. Very shortly, more engagement is going to also take place in the farmland preservation plan. That's something that sometimes gets forgotten as we're going through this process, but we're doing 2 documents at once. So there's going to be additional engagement session about the farmland preservation land use plan. This includes some opportunity meetings, preservation workshop, and some potential additional survey work. One thing that you will find on your desk that's very timely is this report that was just released, and it's called The Rural Wisconsin. So about a year ago, WCA engaged a gentleman named Dale Knapp to begin what's called forward analytics. He used to work for Wisconsin Taxpayer Groups, and he was actually from Fort Atkinson. And so he started really doing a report of talking about what are the trends we're seeing across the state, especially what's called rural Wisconsin. And we're kind of that middle group. We're called micropolitan in this, but we're also considered rural, and some of the factors that go into it. So I encourage you to read this. It's some good data. There's going to be more information that's going to be released, but part of what I'm telling you is we're also going to try to get Dale to come talk to this group probably in April or May to talk about data specific to Jefferson County as it ties to the comprehensive plan. So we understand what some of the data is telling us. So as you start to engage in debate the latter half of 2020 related to the comp plan and the farmland preservation plan, you're aware of some of the trends and things that are occurring with data related to Jefferson County and our surrounding areas. So those are the main things I want to quickly cover, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Get yourself a drink of water, you've been talking a lot. Final item in special order of business is county board member introduction of a resolution. Supervisor Morse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really don't have any major comments at this time. I think the resolution speaks for itself. And we understand that this is the first step in a procedure, and so we're going to.
And the resolution is part of your packet, so you're able to read it. The basis for bringing this resolution forward is covered by County Board Resolution, County Board Rule 3.03, Parent 9, and I'm going to read that paragraph in its entirety. All resolutions, ordinances, petitions, and reports presented to the board shall be in writing, sponsored by the county administrator, a county board member, or county committee, board, commission, or other body. Resolutions and ordinances not introduced by committee or the county administrator shall be referred to an appropriate committee by the chair. A resolution or ordinance referred to a committee pursuant to this paragraph may be placed on the county board agenda for further action upon the written request of 5 county board members, which shall be submitted to the chair not sooner than 60 days after the referral of the item to the committee. Such item shall then be placed on the next regular county board agenda, subject to any statutory requirements or other limitations. This key word for right now is the resolution shall be referred to a committee by the county board chair. The rule does not say when. And this chair intends to take a deliberate approach in determining which committee it is referred to. Here's why. At least 3 times this has come before the executive or its previous iteration as the Administration Rules Committee, and each time the executive committee has declined to forward it to the board. Its last go at it, if you will, was at the end of last month when the vote was 2 to 3. It was also taken up at one point, a similar resolution by the zoning committee, which also the motion failed to advance it to the board. I'm aware that at least 2 other committee chairs were approached about putting it on their agenda and they declined. So I intend to be deliberate in the approach as to how this resolution is handled. It shall be and will be referred to a committee before the end of this term. Another comment, I will not discuss the merits of this resolution with any other county board supervisor, and here's why. There have been representations made that X number of supervisors would vote in support of this resolution. That raises concerns for me. I would not put myself in the position of potentially being part of a walking quorum, which would be a violation of Wisconsin open meetings law with a fine up to $300, and worse yet, the embarrassment that would come with it. Not saying that's happened, but that will be my policy. You can each assess the risk in your own way as far as having conversations among yourself before it actually comes to the board in a legally noticed meeting. Thank you. Next, we go to the Finance Committee with a resolution disallowing claim of Gerald Druick. Supervisor Jones, please.
Resolution number 2019-70. A claim has been made against Jefferson County for damages. The claim has been reviewed by the county insurance carrier Wemmick and was recommended for disallowance based on the finding that the county has no liability for this claim and is not legally responsible for alleged damages. This resolution formally denies said claim filed against Jefferson County and directs the Corporation Council to give the claimant notice of disallowance. The Finance Committee met on February 11, 2020 and recommended forwarding this resolution to the County Board for approval. Fiscal note. This matter has been referred to the Wisconsin Municipal Mutual Insurance Company, Wemmick, and will be resolved in accordance with the terms of the county policy. Mr. Chair, I move for passage of this resolution.
Moved and seconded to disallow the claim of Gerald Druick. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The resolution is, the claim is disallowed, sorry. Next, a resolution disallowing the claim of Donald DeBetts. Professor Jones.
Resolution number 2019-71. A claim has been made against Jefferson County for damages. The claim has been reviewed by the county insurance carrier Wemmick and was recommended for disallowance based on the finding that the county has no liability for this claim and is not legally responsible for alleged damages. This resolution formally denies said claim filed against Jefferson County and directs the Corporation Council to give the claimant notice of disallowance. The Finance Committee met on February 11, 2020 and recommended forwarding this resolution to the County Board for approval. Fiscal note, this matter has been referred to the Wisconsin Municipal Mutual Insurance Company, Wemmick, and will be resolved in accordance with the terms of the county policy. Mr. Chair, I move for passage of this resolution.
Moved and seconded to disallow the claim of Donald DeBetts. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The claim is disallowed. Next is a resolution awarding the sale of $7,600,000 General Obligation Capital Project Bonds Series 2020A. And I understand that the Chair of the Finance Committee requests that there be a short presentation before introduction of the resolution.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Good evening. I'm Joe Murray from Elders. I'm proud to be the county's financial advisor. At your places this evening, you should have gotten a copy of our sale day report. If you could find that, I'll be referring to it if you want to flip through it. If you recall, last month I was here before you and the board authorized the sale of $7,600,000 of general obligation capital project bonds to help finance your improvements to your communication projects as well as to county buildings. As part of, after that approval, we began the process to do a full competitive sale. That included getting a credit rating for the county. I'm pleased to let you know that your AA2 rating was affirmed, which was very good. It reflects that you have strong reserves and liquidity, that you have a prime location being located between Madison and Milwaukee, as well as access down to the southwest and Janesville and Beloit. You have strong equalized values for a county of your size and rating, and you also have an extremely low debt burden, as we talked about a moment ago. This morning we received 5 bids on your behalf. The low bid came in from the Baker Group of Oklahoma City. I'm very pleased to tell you that the news was good. If you recall, when I was here last month, we were projecting that a true interest cost would come in at roughly 3.115%. The low bid today came in at 1.965%. That's 115 basis points. That's 1.15% lower than what we had projected a month ago. Also, the county received a premium bid where in return for being able to sell it to the investors at higher coupon rates, they provide you cash up front now to help pay down that interest cost in order to help win the bid. You received a premium bid of $231,055. This is going to be used to pay the interest-only payment structured for this year in the 2020 budget. If we didn't have that premium, it would have to come out of your fund balance or some other part of your budget. And it will also be used to reduce the tax levy support payment for next year's payment on the issue as well. Together with the lower interest rates and the premium, I'm pleased to report that the county is going to save $1,054,856 from what I projected a month ago. As I told the Finance Committee, I've never been able to relay such good news to any of my clients in 12 years. So, never seen 7 figures. As I told you, we were using conservative numbers, but we weren't thinking they were that conservative to be off by 115 basis points. So, very good news. The market hit a record low last week, so the timing was very good to move forward. Also, part of the structuring, we had anticipated having an underwriter discount where the underwriter takes their money up front. Since they did it as a premium bid, they get their payment by selling it to their investors. That allowed the county to retain $98,675 for additional project costs. If you turn to page 3, just quickly, just to show you that there was very good competition on this as well. Of the 3 of the 5 bids were within 5 basis points, so they were very, very close, and all 5 of them were within 10 basis points, and all of them were well underneath our estimates. So it was very good news. A lot of interest, a lot of competition. The second or cover bid, as you'll see on page 4, it's hard to read with the page number, was Robert W. Baird, and as you see, they were at a true interest cost of 2.001%. So 5 basis points off. Turning to page 6, this just again highlights that you did receive a premium bid. That $231,000 can only be used to pay for interest on the debt, so that's why it's been placed in the debt fund. And as I noted, you have $98,675 extra dollars for projects should any of the projects being undertook come in over budget, and it also has a language that you could use it for other communications or other county building projects. You have that flexibility within this ordinance. You can't use it for highway projects, but you can use it for other county buildings. I think if you turn to page 6, I wanted to highlight here, this shows the tax impact projections based on the actual schedules. I believe when I was here a month ago, I told you that the total cost, principal and interest, over the entire 20 years of the bonds was going to be about $140 per $100,000 of equalized value. Based on the new rates, the total cost comes in at $29.43 per $100,000. So it's not a huge savings in terms of $10, but it's still $10, and that is the total cost, total principal of interest for the full $7.6 million borrowing. That's not a one-year increase, that's over the entire 20-year term. If you turn to page 7, it just shows the trend of the market, and you'll see that it did hit a record low just last week on the 7th. Has been staying low, and at the very end is the rating report that you can look at to see where you stand. But a AA2 is a very good rating, and it did help receive very good rates today. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about the sale or the process.
Any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome to come back every month with more unicorns and rainbows. Supervisor Coots, I'm sorry.
Just wanted to ask you the number again for that 100,000 property, the property value at 100,000. What was that?
The projection based on your current equalized value of what you have right now on the books, for the total principal and interest cost, going back, if you go back to page 6, you'll see that number in the last green column on the right of $9,530,257. That's the total principal and interest that you're going to be paying for the $7.6 million that you're borrowing. Based on today's equalized value, that works out to $129.43 per $100,000 of equalized value. Total.
Any other questions? Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Now comes Supervisor Jones for the Finance Committee with a resolution awarding the sale of $7,600,000 general obligation capital project bonds series 2028.
Before I read all 36 pages, I'd like to thank Mr. Murray for sticking around tonight and giving us his expertise on this great news for this bonding project. And like he said, the first time that savings of $1 million, so that's awful good news. Resolution number 72. Whereas on January 14, 2020, the County Board of Supervisors of Jefferson County, Wisconsin, the county, adopted an initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in an amount of not to exceed $7,600,000 for the public purpose of paying the cost of capital projects consisting of communication projects and county building projects, the project. The above referenced initial resolution referred to herein as the initial resolution. Whereas on January 14, 2020, the County Board of Supervisors of the county also adopted a resolution, the set sale resolution, providing that the general obligation bond issued authorized by the initial resolution be issued and sold as an issue of bonds designated as general obligation capital project bonds series 2020A, the bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of the project. Whereas the county is authorized by the provisions of section 67.04 Wisconsin statutes to borrow money and issue general obligation bonds for such public purposes. Whereas none of the proceeds of the bond shall be used to fund the operating expenses of the general fund of the county or to fund the operating expenses of any special revenue fund of the county that is supported by the property taxes. Whereas pursuant to the set sale resolution, the county has directed Elders and Associates Incorporated, Elders, to take the steps necessary to sell the bonds to pay the cost of the project. Whereas Elders is in consultation with the officials of the county to prepare a notice of sale, a copy of which is attached hereto as Exhibit A and incorporated herein by this reference, setting forth the details of the bid and requirements for the bonds and indicating that the bonds will be offered for public sale on February 11, 2020. Whereas the county clerk, in consultation with Elders, caused a form of notice of the sale of the published and or announced and caused the notice of sale to be distributed to potential bidders offering the bonds for public sale. Whereas the county has duly received bids for the bonds as described on the bid tabulation attached hereto as Exhibit B and incorporated herein by this reference the bid tabulation. Whereas it has been determined that the proposal submitted by the financial institution listed first on the bid tabulation fully complies with the bid requirements set forth in the notice of sale and is deemed to be the most advantageous to the county. Elders has recommended that the county accept the proposal. A copy of this proposal submitted by such institution, the purchaser, is attached hereto as Exhibit C and incorporated herein by this reference. And is whereas the County Board of Supervisors now deem it necessary and desirable in the best interest of the county that the bonds be issued in the aggregated principal amount of $7,600,000. Mr. Chair, I move for passage of this resolution.
Second.
Moved and seconded to award the sale of $7,600,000 general obligation capital project bonds series 2020A. Discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Votes are locked, 27 yes, 0 no, and 3 absent.
The resolution is adopted. Now to the Human Resources Committee with a resolution ratifying the 2020 through 2022 collective bargaining agreement with the Jefferson County Law Enforcement Officers Association, Local 102. Supervisor Brogler, please.
Resolution number 2019-73, Executive Summary. The Jefferson County Law Enforcement Officers Association, Law Local 102, the association, notified Jefferson County of its intent to negotiate a successor collective agreement prior to the expiration of the existing agreement on December 31st, 2019. Following this notification, association representatives and Jefferson County representatives commenced negotiation resulting in a tentative agreement. The tentative agreement extends the collective bargaining agreement through 2022 and is amended as summarized below. The Human Resource Committee reviewed and approved the proposed amendments at its February 7, 2020 meeting. This resolution ratifies the tentative agreement entered into between the association and Jefferson County for a successor collective bargaining agreement through 2022. Fiscal note. The total increase in wages, WRS and FICA, is $149,645 for 2020, increasing by an additional $153,131 for 2021, and increasing by an additional $157,372 for 2022, for a total increase of $912,569 over 3 years, as shown below. A 1.5 increase in wages, WRS and FICA 96,338, has been included in the 2020 budget. The additional 0.83% over what was budgeted equates to a difference of $53,307. This amount will be allocated from the Jefferson County Contingency Fund. The 2021 and 2022 costs will be included in the 2021 and 2022 budget. This resolution amends the Sheriff's Office 2020 adopted budget. County Board approval requires a 2/3 vote of the entire membership of the County Board, 20 of the 30 members. I move for passage.
Moved and seconded to ratify the 2020-2022 collective bargaining agreement with the Jefferson County Law Enforcement Officers Association, Local 102. Discussion. Of a roll call vote, 20 votes are required for adoption.
Votes are locked, we have 27 yes, 0 no, and 3 absent.
The resolution is adopted. Now to the Parks Committee with a resolution authorizing motorized recreation grant application to fund the Jefferson County Snowmobile Trail Aid Program. Supervisor Nass, please.
Excuse me. Resolution 74, authorizing motorized recreational grant application to fund the Jefferson County Snowmobile Trail Aid Program. It's Executive summary, Jefferson County participates in Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Snowmobile Trail Aid Program funded by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Motorized Recreation Grant, which provides funding for the development and maintenance of approximately 191 miles of public snowmobile trails in Jefferson County. Applying for these grant funds requires county board authorization. The resolution authorizes Jefferson County Administrator to submit a Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Motorized Recreation Grant application seeking funds for snowmobile trail maintenance development and to administer the funds according to grant requirements. The Parks Committee considered this resolution at February 3rd, 2020 meeting and recommended forwarding it to the county board. I move for the adoption of this resolution as printed.
Second.
Moved and seconded to authorize motorized recreation grant application to fund the Jefferson County Snowmobile Trail Aid Program. Discussion. We'll have a roll call vote, please.
Votes elect, 27 yes, 0 no, 3 absent.
Resolution is adopted. Now, also the Parks Committee, a resolution authorizing the sale of county-owned property to the City of Fort Atkinson for the purpose of extending Farmco Lane to the City of Fort Atkinson wastewater treatment facility. Supervisor Nass, please.
Executive summary, the Farmco Lane is a public road located in the City of Fort Atkinson, which leads to the City of Fort Atkinson's wastewater treatment facility. In order for vehicles to access the wastewater treatment facility, they must cross over a section of the Glacial River Bike Trail. Farmco Lane currently begins at Janesville Avenue and extends westward to the east line of the Glacial River Trail. The City of Fort Atkinson is seeking to extend Farmco Lane to the wastewater treatment facility and has requested Jefferson County to dedicate a portion of the Glacial River Bike Trail, 66 feet by 100 feet, as a public right-of-way to allow this extension. The Parks Committee considered this resolution on February 3rd, 2020 meeting and recommended forwarding to County Board to authorize the execution of a quitclaim deed conveying 66 foot by 100 foot section of the county-owned property to the City of Fort Atkinson to be used as a public right-of-way for extension of Farmco Lane in exchange for a nominal amount, which the fiscal note will say this resolution has no fiscal impact. I move for the adoption of this resolution.
Moved and seconded to authorize the sale of county-owned property to the City of Fort Atkinson for the purpose of extending Farmco Lane to the City of Fort Atkinson wastewater treatment facility. Discussion. Supervisor Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just a little confused why we were giving it to Ford instead of just dedicating it as a public right-of-way.
Mr. Waymeyer, would you like to field that one?
So from my understanding, before Blair left, is because it wasn't that, it's not a right of way to begin with. And so it's not like we took an old road base and we're saying now it's here as like a township road. And so the easy solution was to do a quick claim deed because we're carving up a current pin that's in existence. That was my understanding of why we're doing the matter. With the Parks Committee, we've had discussions if at some point do we look at the adjoining parcels. Most of the parcels that are part of the bike trail that are in incorporated areas are typically given to those cities, and so that's something to consider in the future to help clean this up. So the legal recommendation was to do a quick claim deed versus a dedication.
Any follow-up question, Supervisor Kelly? You have a follow-up? Further discussion? Roll call vote, please. Resolution is adopted. Now to the Planning and Zoning Committee, giving Supervisor Nass a workout this evening. The report on approval of petitions followed by the ordinance amending the official zoning map.
Report to honorable members, Jefferson County Board of Supervisors, Jefferson County Planning and Zoning Committee, having considered petitions to amend the official zoning map of Jefferson County, filed for public hearing held September 19th and November 21st, 2019, as required by law pursuant to Wisconsin statutes. Notice thereof having been given and being duly advised of the wishes of the town boards and persons in the area affected, hereby makes the following recommendations: approval of the petitions as listed below. Dated this day, 25th day of November 2019, Blaine Paulson, Secretary, which takes us to ordinance number 16, that is to amend the official zoning map. I move to adopt this ordinance as printed.
Moved and seconded to amend the zoning ordinance as printed. Discussion. Roll call vote, please. All in favor, say aye. Aye. I'm sorry, voice vote. Everyone in favor, say aye. No, long day. Opposed, no. The resolution is adopted. Okay, we're getting to the end here. Appointment by the County Board Chair. I, Jim Schrader, Chairman of the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors, Jefferson County, Wisconsin, as the appointing authority for standing committees. Hereby appoint Joanne Davis as the Farm Service Agency Representative of the Land and Water Conservation Committee for an indeterminate term. No action is required. Is that correct? It's not required under the Next is public comment of a general nature. Would any member of the public wish to address the board at this time? Seeing none. Announcements? Are there any announcements? Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an invitation to an announcement of a Valentine's Day spaghetti dinner. That's going to be at the Fort Atkinson Club Community Center in Fort Atkinson this Friday, February 14th, which is St. Valentine's Day. Make sure nobody forgets that. It's in support of this venue, the Fort Atkinson Club, which does a lot of good in the city of Fort Atkinson, especially their fine lecture series that you should keep an eye on and go to when you see a good lecture. So this will be from 5:30 until 7 p.m. on Friday. It's open to the public, and it's 211 South Water Street East in Fort Atkinson. More information is on their website and their Facebook page. Thank you.
Thank you. Other announcements? Supervisor Renard, please.
I'd just like to appeal to all of you to take a close look at the proposed rules on remote attendance. And if you have any experience with other groups attending meetings remotely, I think the executive committee would be very interested in your opinion and your feedback. And if you think that the guidelines that we've set forward here that are being proposed are adequate or too restrictive, or this is the first time we've really done this, so we'd really be interested in your opinions.
Thank you. Other announcements? Mr. Waymire.
Just a reminder, next Wednesday, February 19th at 7 o'clock at the fairgrounds, the Wisconsin Policy Forum will be releasing a report on shared services with Jefferson County and our 7 largest municipalities. So everyone's invited to attend. I had sent out an email earlier, but it's a quick reminder of what we've been working on probably for the last 6 months with some of our communities looking at different ways of doing business. So thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and this is of sufficient importance, part of our strategic plan that per diems would be paid for attendance and mileage.
What was the date, time again, Jim?
Could you repeat that, please, Mr. Waymire?
February 19th, next Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. at the Fair Park Activity Center in Jefferson.
Other announcements? Motion to adjourn? Moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any objection? We're adjourned. Thank you.